Hello everyone and welcome to Dutch Greybeard. Before diving into this reading experience, let me show you some publication history. The Fionavar Tapestry trilogy by Guy Gavriel Kay was published between 1984 and 1986. The first book of the infinitely more famous Wheel of Time series by Robert Jordan, The Eye of the World, was first published in 1990. Although it's been said that Jordan started writing it in 1984. Given what we are about to find out about GGK's first trilogy, this is very interesting, to say the least. We'll get to answering the why of this statement later on in this video. But just keep in mind that the Summer Tree preceded The Eye of the World in writing and publishing. At the time I'm recording this, I have finished reading The Wandering Fire, the second book in this trilogy, and have started reading The Darkest Road. I want to give each of these three books in the series its own dedicated video, simply because these books give me the level of writing I love in books. Almost every sentence is a well-rounded and finished whole, and a small piece of art many times. Let's start with The Summer Tree. I read this book of 400 pages in between June 29 and July 9. It was a buddy read with BJ Minton, my friend and follower of this channel from the very first hour. BJ had picked our first two buddy reads, The Lies of Locke Lamora by Scott Lynch and Red Rising by Pierce Brown. Both were not really to his liking, so he let me pick our third buddy read. After having read Tigana at the end of 2023, I'd been wanting to read more by Guy Gavriel Kay. Tigana became my book of the year, and I wanted to read all of this author in order of publication. That way, I can follow the writer's development through the years, so I chose his debut novel, The Summer Tree. The other books I want to read by Guy Gavriel Kay you can see over there. I don't have all of them yet, but I will. I will keep this reading experience free of spoilers, but I do want to briefly recap the gist of this story. The book sets off in our own world. 5 fellow students from the University of Toronto are invited by Lauren Silvercloak to come with him to his world of Fionavar. They are to be the honoured guests at the celebration of the 50th year of the reign of High King Ailel, or Ailel, of Brenin. One guest for each decade of his reign. Lauren is mage to the High King. They agree after some debate, which is the start of an incredible adventure which has bearing on all the worlds. The speed with which Kevin, as the first, agrees to this plan seems a little bit unrealistic, but everything becomes more and more logical and believable as the story progresses. All the students, Kevin Lane, Paul Shaver, Dave Martinyuk, Kimberly Ford and Jennifer Lowell, appear to be destined to play a special part in this adventure. They gradually integrate into the world of Fionavar, where the great evil Dark One, who has many names, has been securely locked away under a mountain 1,000 years ago. Somehow, by forces yet unknown, Rakoth Maugrim is set loose. His sinister plans are to be thwarted, of course. There are many plot lines, characters, and intricate and detailed world building. And this is straight away one of my lesser experiences with this book. GGK is almost religiously showing and not telling, which means that more than once I found myself swimming in too deep and murky waters. A lot of times the words on a number of consecutive pages had no meaning for me at all. The lore, with lots of names, at times was too detailed, and the writer was only adding more pieces to the puzzle. Like at the beginning of part 3 of the book, the writer picks up the story of one of the students. Within 2 paragraphs, I got bombarded with this overload of foreign terms. Dalray, Eltor, Oberey, Celadon, Urgach, Adain, Sinmir, the Latham, Kolam, Revor, Baal Rangat, enough already. One other hurdle GGK puts up is that every new scene, the character involved, or the POV, is introduced as he or she. It could be a few paragraphs or even pages into the scene that the author finally gives us the name of who we're dealing with here. To me, these are obstacles to confuse the reader, but I cannot see why the writer should do this. When I was a younger reader, I believed that the more difficult and incomprehensible a book, the higher its literary value. And I have to admit that at times, the reward at the end of a tough book could be very satisfying. But as I get older, I find it increasingly irritating when an author purposely creates fog, hindrances and confusion, unless it benefits the story, which it can. It took many pages for many of these pieces to fall into place. Eventually they did, but that is one of the things I find increasingly frustrating in a lot of fantasy books, that authors leave readers in the dark for too many pages. For instance, the first book of Anne McCaffrey's Dragon Riders of Pern had this same problem for me. Of course, there is a reward when the jigsaw puzzle starts to resemble an image one can recognize, but it is truly a matter of how many pages are needed for that to happen. GGK has really created a magnificent jigsaw puzzle that every reader has to take his time for to solve. With trust, all falls into place eventually, but it does require some perseverance and patience. And even while I was groping for some solid ground, I still enjoyed the exquisite prose. Apart from the truly epic story, I love the philosophy of the Fionavar world. On page 30 in my copy of the book, Lauren Silvercloak explains, "There are many worlds caught in the loops and walls of time. Seldom do they intersect, and so for the most part they are unknown to each other. Only in Fionavar, the prime creation which all the others imperfectly reflect, is the lore gathered and preserved that tells of how to bridge the worlds." The tapestry from the trilogy title is the great tapestry that is woven by the weaver on the loom. The threads that are being woven on this loom are the lives of all people. A couple of quotes regarding this. When Kimberly is brought up to speed in a magical way for her future role, it says, "And Kimberly was given the tapestry, the pattern of the weaver at the loom." Later on, about one of the characters who sacrificed herself for the greater good, "She had stripped her soul of any place it held in time. She was gone, utterly, not just from life, but more, much more, from death as well, from what lay after in the patterns of the weaver for his children." Or, "The dead are still in time. They're traveling. They're not lost." I find it remarkable that The Summer Tree was published in 1984, which is supposedly the year Robert Jordan started writing The Eye of the World. This whole concept of the weaver on the loom, weaving a tapestry that contains all the life of the people in all the different worlds, looks suspiciously much like the pattern and threads the Wheel of Time produces. Reincarnation, and much in The Summer Tree regarding the philosophical aspect of the story, I find reproduced with different vocabulary in The Wheel of Time. I do not know if both authors have ever been in touch, or if Robert Jordan indeed was inspired by the Fionavar Tapestry. On this topic I find only a small discussion on Reddit, which is 7 years old. What I do know is that both philosophies are notably similar and not to mention beautiful. In the margins of the summitry I wrote down many exclamations like beautiful, wow, or amazing. I already mentioned this character who had given up her soul. After that has happened, there is this small reminiscence. These are kinds of action, for good or ill, that lie so far outside the boundaries of normal behavior that they force us, in acknowledging that they have occurred, to restructure our own understanding of reality. We have to make room for them. To me, this is strikingly profound and beautiful. Some actions are so special that we have to restructure our own understanding of reality in order to grasp them. This requires space in time and in our heads. We have to make room for them. To me, this is pure literature. Another example of Kay's excellence as a writer is how people in Fionavar do not say nicely done when they want to pay someone a compliment. Instead, they say brightly woven. Or when someone goes off on a mission, people say, I wish you bright weaving. Or when they want to express their gratitude, they say, we are grateful beyond measure for what you have woven. It all fits perfectly within the philosophy of this world, with the weaver working away on his loom. I'd love to go into further detail regarding the story, but that would mean I'd be entering spoiler territory. So let's leave it at this. Even though I find that GGK could have made me a little more comfortable at times, he presented me with a gorgeous and well-balanced story. Some parts are hard to follow, while other scenes almost made me cry or truly touched me to my core. Like the entire sequence where Paul's history with Rachel, the love of his life, is related from Paul's perspective. With very few words, the reader gets a very good insight in Paul's character and his trauma. Like in Tigana, the love between people is poetically worded. You're a harper, Paul. You have harper's hands. Where's my harp then? Straight man. And Rachel said, me, of course. My heart's your harpstring. I loved the summitry. This is fantasy that speaks to my heart. The dialogues are stately. There is a lot at stake, and seemingly random people become heroes or play a pivotal part in the story. And Guy Gavriel Kay is one of the most gifted writers in this genre. The story is intriguing, although it sometimes feels like you're in a car that accelerates quickly and then suddenly slows down, accelerates again and then brakes again, and so on. At times, not an easy ride, but fascinating nonetheless. I gave the summitry 89 points out of 100, and I cannot wait to get to Kay's later works. My next book by this author, after I finished the Fionavar Tapestry, is going to be A Song for Arbonne. Hopefully, that will be very soon. Thank you very much for watching this video. Until we meet again at Dutch Greybeard.